Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. This is the next installment of my seemingly never-ending Laserdisc Collection video updates, and this is yet another mystery box from the wonderful Jason Koestner, who decided to just send another box of titles my way, and once again I am completely bowled over by his generosity because he sent me some really notable titles, including some that I've been after for quite some time and ones that I just never thought I'd find at a decent price, let alone in really wonderful condition. So, as usual, this is a complete mystery box of random titles, and I will start with the couple of Criterion discs that he sent me. And this one right here is one of the most notable and sought after of Criterion's CAV special editions, and that is spine number 75, the special edition of Ghostbusters, which needs no introduction for Laserdisc collectors. This is a hard disc to even get at a decent price in the CLV standard version without the extras. What I didn't know until I was actually looking at this particular copy, this has a very thick gloss on the jacket, which is uncommon for a lot of Criterion discs, especially at this time. So I've never actually gotten to look at one of the CAVs before. The only one I've seen before was a totally trashed copy. So, and I've seen the CLV version, but I've never found a clean CAV version. And usually these go for a pretty high price premium just because it's literally Ghostbusters and the Criterion version. It is an exclusive transfer done at the time, and it does have some exclusive extras that are still exclusive to this particular release, but most of the same content has been gone over on the various Sony releases over the years. But Ghostbusters is not only a beloved film, but a film that seems to look and sound a bit different on virtually every release and format. So it's kind of a good thing to actually have a couple different versions if you're a big fan, because usually the transfers have varied wildly. This, of course, is in full CAV. This is the most deluxe presentation on Laserdisc, and it does have the film's original Dolby Stereo mix as the matrixed PCM digital track. And it also, of course, has a lovely gatefold done in the Criterion style of the time, but a little bit spiffier because there's so many wonderful images, and they had to cram in, of course, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And you can also tell by the way the light reflects off of this that this is a very thick gloss on this cover. So again, it's one of the, it's really the glossiest Criterion jacket I've ever seen or handled. So that's another benefit of having this. The one downside of this release, and what again is not going to be any surprise to most collectors, is that there is a very high laser rot percentage with this particular pressing. So anytime you look at the Criterion version, you don't necessarily want to spend an arm and a leg at the prices that they usually go for, because chances are it will have at least some bit of laser rot. So the discs themselves look clean, but of course you never know with a title like this that has a high rut percentage if you're going to have any sort of light speckling or anything until you actually watch through the whole transfer and spin through. So I plan to save this for October Halloween viewing and add it into my usual far too many films roster that I try to cram all into the same month like a crazy person. But I'm really looking forward to this because I've always been curious to see what the CAV presentation looks like, and now I can finally do so. He also sent me an upgrade copy for Criterion Spine 144, which is their deluxe version of Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is one of their most all-out deluxe Laserdisc packages they ever did. This is the deluxe special edition trifold affair, so do bear with me. This is going to be a little awkward to try and do on camera here, but of course what you would do is you open the first panel and you have the chapter breakdowns, the wonderful imagery, and then of course you have to actually open for the full trifold effect, and the discs are housed inside the sleeves. And so you have the full wraparound effect. These are a little bit finicky to handle, and what you should never do is try to open these on camera like this when you're sitting in a chair, so you're actually mounting it on your shoulder like I'm doing here, but this is just to give you the overall effect. And of course, the discs are in the gatefold pockets, and the center pocket actually has disc too. So they are a little finicky to work with, but once you deal with these a couple times, you can kind of get used to it. But that also means that most copies of any Criterion trifold are going to be really dinged up, and the spines are pretty worn, if not shot. So a lot of times you find these really beat up. So it can be a little tricky nowadays to find a clean copy that also has a good condition jacket. So this is definitely the best presentation of the film on Laserdisc. It's matted to a 1.75 to 1 widescreen ratio. It's a lovely transfer for the time, and it has the Dolby Surround original mix on the digital PCM tracks, in addition to a Terry Gilliam director's commentary on analog track 2. It is absolutely stuffed with special features, and this forms the bulk of what is on all of the subsequent releases and the subsequent Criterion releases on modern formats. But this is still a really handsome presentation for the time, definitely the spiffiest you could get of this film on Laserdisc, and for the longest time, this was still the best version around until the most modern releases and the new scans that have been done of this film. This is an underrated film. It's not necessarily for everyone, but I always enjoy coming back to it, and the Criterion Laserdisc is my preferred physical media version, simply for the deluxe attention to care and detail and the wonderful packaging. And then, to my absolute surprise, he sent me Spine 211, which is the CAV deluxe edition of John Woo's masterpiece, The Killer. Now, I have the later CLV pressing, and then, of course, this master was ported to Criterion's early DVD. But I have never been able to find this CAV version at a decent price with a jacket that wasn't beat up or destroyed. And so this has just been one of my top wishlist Criterion titles that I've been meaning to find at a good price with a good condition jacket, because you really want this jacket in good shape because it has the alternative poster artwork beautifully printed. This also is a deluxe Criterion trifold, so it is also one you want to make sure you get a good jacket of, and that is, again, harder to do because it's the trifold. I have actually seen copies of this before that I've almost purchased, and I didn't because the price was too high, and they were also really dinged up. So it's very hard to get one of these where it's not totally shot. So again, bear with me. This is just me trying to give you the idea of how these work on camera. But I love how for the center they used the fiery image from the climax. And then over here on the side, we have more beautiful imagery and the continuation of the essay. The rear looks really nice. It has that stark black and white with the red text of the title effect. We do have a really nice amount of special features. This was the full deluxe version, and all of these extras would eventually make it over to Criterion's DVD, which is, of course, also long out of print. Now, even though this is an older transfer and you are dealing with the one particular set of subtitles, this does have a PCM mono track, and this is the best source for the film's original mono mix you will find anywhere. It's the best audio source I know of this film, period, to exist in the world. Same thing with Hardboiled. The best source of the original mono tracks for both The Killer and Hardboiled are the original Criterion Laserdisc releases. This also still has the exclusive Criterion extras, and unfortunately, due to the terrible video history of the John Woo Hong Kong masterpieces and how they've been kicked around over the years and how their rights are all over the place and they've never been properly taken care of, this is still one of your best viewing options. This film had a notorious Blu-ray from Dragon Dynasty that's one of the worst Blu-rays ever released in the United States. It was an awful 1080i up conversion of a PAL master that's just... oh boy, it's really bad. So unfortunately, this is still actually one of the best presentations you can find of the film in the US on a US video release. And it's still a good transfer, and of course it's going to be even better seeing it in CAV over the CLV version I'm used to, which also doesn't have these extras. So you can actually get this if you're patient enough. I just had never come across one at a decent price that was in perfect condition. But now the DVD is going for quite a bit, so I think the Laserdisc is actually the better way to go, because you get lossless audio, you get all the same extras, more deluxe packaging, and since that's an early Criterion DVD that's also non-anamorphic, there's not much of a quality difference if you have a really good player. And again, the audio is better here because it is uncompressed. So this is just one of my super, probably, top 5 Criterion wish list titles that I'm now so thrilled to have in my collection alongside the later CLV edition. Next, he sent me 2 rather uncommon AC3 reissue titles. Both of these films have much more common standard releases with a Matrix surround track and some other versions as well, but both of them got later Dolby Digital AC3 reissues that are rather uncommon. The first is the AC3 release of 2010, or I should say the reissue. I have this already, but this one is in slightly better shape, so this will be an upgrade copy for me, and it has the really nice super thick gloss that sort of denotes it as a MGM Stealth AC3 title, a Stealth AC3, because MGM basically reused the cover of the original main letterbox pressing and just added a Dolby Digital moniker on the front and back in a very sort of sneaky way. Otherwise, it looks seemingly identical to the original. It even has the MGM gold letterbox banner across the top, but if you look, it's not only got the thick gloss, the gold bar is darker, the actual printing is a little bit different, and you have the all-important Dolby Digital logo actually printed on the jacket. And it's a little hard to see, but because the cover is black, but it's literally the logo in a black box. And on all of these sort of stealth AC3 discs, they literally just took the original jacket layout design, and when they printed these new copies, they just put the Dolby Digital moniker somewhere on there. And on the back, you have the same rear cover as the original letterbox pressing, except we have the addition of the Dolby Digital information. And over here on the side, you can see that it was actually pressed by Image Entertainment, which denotes this as a late release because Image took over essentially printing duties and distribution duties for the studios at the end of the LD format. The other dead giveaway, besides that very thick gloss, because the original pressing does not have that in terms of the first widescreen version that's super common, this is also the much thinner cardstock. So the jacket is a lot thinner, and so that's why you're going to have things like some seam splitting. So this has some seam splitting on the spine and has been repaired with tape, but that's all because it's a much thinner jacket. So if you saw this side by side with an original pressing of the common widescreen version that you can get for like $2 or $3, that would have a much thicker jacket in terms of the actual cardstock. So that's another way to figure out if you've got a Stealth AC3 release from MGM for these titles, that if you can't tell if there's a Dolby Digital logo on it. If you feel it's a glossy jacket that's really thin, that's another dead giveaway because that was not on the original common pressing. So those are the things you're looking for, and this particular pressing of 2010 rarely pops up. It was made to go along with the AC3 Stealth reissue of 2001. That was also a CLV movie-only disc. So if you can find both of those, it's nice to have both to go hand in hand. And then the other AC3 reissue is from Universal, and it's the reissue of Apollo 13. Apollo 13, of course, is a super common title in the standard Matrix stereo-only Universal widescreen pressing, which I have. Then, of course, it got the Signature Collection version, which did add a bunch of extras. Then it got the DTS pressing, which was movie-only, but with a DTS soundtrack. And then Universal finally made a deal to start licensing Dolby Digital and gave it a Dolby Digital release, which I have here. And you can always tell these Universal Dolby Digital reissues that came a bit later, again, once they made a licensing deal contract. All of these got this sort of modernized Universal cover where you have the sort of same imagery that would be on the standard letterbox pressing. But if you look, we have a Universal late 90s logo here on the bottom center, and then you have this modernized widescreen banner on the top. This is what you're going to see on the handful of Universal AC3 pressings. This is the same type of cover design you get for the AC3 reissues, or AC3 issues, period, of both Jurassic Park and The Lost World. So if you look at those and any other, 1997, 1998 Universal AC3 Laserdisc reissue, it's going to have this sort of cover format with this type of widescreen banner and then the Universal logo here at the bottom. But otherwise, it's just reusing what would have been the standard widescreen jacket with the Universal blurbage and stuff. They've just taken that off and left the rest of the cover blank. So that's how you can differentiate the AC3 pressings from Universal versus the original, much more common widescreen versions. The back is otherwise the same as the standard and DTS version, except that we, of course, have the information about Dolby Digital. This is still seemingly the same THX supervised master, so it should be the same video master as the other Laserdisc, but as with a lot of later DTS pressings, they can sometimes use a slightly different or a completely different newer master at times. So you kind of have to just pop the disc on. Most of the time, it's going to be the same picture master as what's on the other pressings, but sometimes the pressing quality can be a little bit better because it's a slightly later pressing or reissue from a couple years down the road. Or in certain instances, like on a few DTS discs I can think of, they got an entirely different, newer, and superior master to the standard older letterbox presentation. But this is just one I've been curious about. This is one of the most well-renowned multi-channel sound mixes of the 90s, and I've always been curious about all the different presentations, so now I can check out the Dolby Digital AC3 Laserdisc. And speaking of both DTS and well-renowned 1990s multi-channel sound mixes, he sent me a couple more DTS discs, some I've always wanted to check out. This one in particular, I've always heard a lot of people raving about how good the DTS track presentation is, and it is a really great 90s surround mix, but I've only had the Blu-ray over the years, and I've also seen the standard pressing, which is matrix stereo only, because this was before Universal even made a deal for Dolby Digital, so they would just do the standard letterbox version with matrix stereo, and then eventually a couple years down the road you'd get the DTS version, and then maybe for bigger titles there might also be an AC3 disc like for Apollo 13. But this is the DTS version of Casper, which, even though it is a film that's, marketed and sold and very much is in the kids sort of family genre, this does have a really active and wonderful 1990s 5.1 surround mix. And again, I've always wanted to try this DTS presentation. Like most DTS discs, well, pretty much like all of them, this came out a couple years later, so it should be a slightly better pressing, but it's also got a nice thick gloss on the jacket compared to the standard letterbox pressing, and it's got the slightly thinner cardstock. So, aside from the giant DTS banner on the top, if you weren't sure this was the DTS version, it does have the glossier and fancier jacket. But again, because it's thinner, you do have to try and get these in nice shape, because most of the time they're going to have corner creases and such. Otherwise, it's got the same exact art and layout design as the standard letterbox pressing, but of course, we have all of our information about it being the DTS version and needing a DTS decoder. So I have just been really wanting to check this out ever since starting to read people kind of rave about this particular disc, and then revisiting the film on Blu-ray a number of years ago and suddenly realizing, hey, this is such a great mix. I'd forgotten how good the audio was for this. So this has been on my wish list for far too long, and now I get to fire this up in time for October seasonal watching and enjoy the DTS track and compare it to the Blu-ray. And not to be outdone, he sent me even more DTS titles that have been atop my wish list for a super long time. And talking about titles that I've been wanting to just be able to at least finally compare for their audio, because I've looked at every other version I get my hands on, he sent me the DTS Die Hard, which is of course using the same art, design, and layout as the standard THX AC3 remaster reissue from 1995, but all three of the Die Hard original trilogy were also done up as DTS versions, and are of course much harder to find because they were done in very limited quantities and are of course very expensive and rare on the used market. So I'm just, again, blown away by his generosity of just sending me these. I've wanted to check these out for an extremely long time. If you look at the cover design, again, they are pretty much mimicking the standard AC3 THX versions that you can get for, $5 to $10 each. But since these are DTS versions, they were done a little bit later, and the cardstock is a little bit thinner. And again, these do have a sort of glossy finish on them, which the standard AC3 versions really don't. But those also feel maybe a little bit sturdier, because that's the sort of trade-off you get, where the DTS jackets were just printed this way. And so while you get the nice gloss, they're also a little bit thinner. So again, that's the sort of jacket printing trade-off you get. Otherwise, this looks pretty much identical to the AC3 version, except all of the information is replaced by the DTS information. So this, I believe what these do is just give us the same 5.1 mix presentations that were done in 1995 based on original mix elements. I believe for Die Hard they were using the 70mm blow-up mix, or the 70mm 6-track audio, I should say. And then this is just giving you the 1995 mix presentation in the full bitrate DTS, which I will compare against the much smaller in file size Dolby Digital AC3 on the standard LD. So now I can finally be able to compare all the major Die Hard releases and check out the sound quality between all of them, because up until this point, the DTS versions have been basically the one that eluded me for all these years. So now I can finally add these to my comparison pile and check out the DTS compared to the AC3, to the DVDs, to the DVD DTS, to the Blu-rays, and so on and so forth. He also sent me the DTS of Die Hard 2, which, again, I'm just astonished, because the DTS Die Hards are very, very tough to come by and usually go for quite a bit. I've tried to get them on eBay so many times. I cannot tell you how many times I've been outbid on these, and they go well out of my price range. So to be able to finally look at any of these, let alone all three, is just amazing. So I'm just, again, bowled over by Jason's wonderful generosity of sending me these. Again, the jackets are pretty much identical to the standard AC3 pressings. We get the same lovely gatefold, but we do get a glossier jacket, so there's a better sort of sheen on the actual printing and the color. The only difference is they are thinner, so as you can see, even when they're well preserved, because it's a thinner jacket, there's a little tiny bit of sort of creasing around the disc, so it's not quite ring wear, but it's just because the discs are in here and the jacket is thinner. And so that's just something you're going to run into with any sort of later LD jacket that's a thinner printed jacket, or one of these DTS versions. That's, again, just sort of the trade-off you get for having the fancier glossy jacket. The rear, again, follows the AC3 layout design. The difference being that now we have the Dolby Digital information replaced by the DTS info. And this should be, like the first film, just the same video master and the same audio master, again, seemingly done from the 70mm blow-up of Die Hard 2. This, of course, just gives you the full bitrate DTS presentation versus the much smaller file size AC3. And so here, of course, is the DTS presentation of Die Hard 3, otherwise following the exact same layout and design of the standard AC3 Laserdisc, which was the primary first Laserdisc release for this film, because it, of course, was the new film, and the other two films were remastered to coincide with the third film getting its Laserdisc release. So we have a nice section of the original poster artwork, now with the DTS banner on top to make it look even more epic. And then we have the same lovely gatefold, which is, again, identical to the standard AC3 release. The only difference is we have a much glossier jacket this time, so the printing is fancier, but it is a thinner cardstock, so you do have to be careful in handling it so you don't accidentally ding it up, because it's just literally thinner. The rear is, of course, the same, except for the DTS logo and information, and I like that they actually worked it into the text, so the actual blurb on the back literally ends with, newly encoded DTS sound, so that's, they at least slightly tweaked the text to also for the match, this is the DTS presentation. And Die Hard 3 has a really bombastic 5.1 track that I really love. And so I've loved it on the AC3 disc, I've loved it on the DVD, I've loved it on the Blu-ray, and I've just always been curious about how the DTS presentation on the Laserdisc stacks up. So it should still be the same sound presentation. Thankfully, this film has never been remixed. There's no reason to. It's a great mix. But I'm just super curious to throw this on and check out how it compares, because this is a bombastic track on regardless of any format you choose to watch it on, and I can't wait to see how the DTS Laserdisc handles that. Next up is another Universal title that had a couple different LD releases and then got a DTS version in The Frighteners and the DTS variant. This is the Peter Jackson film from the 90s that I have not seen in a really long time. So this will be really fun to crank up for Halloween viewing opportunities and to get to experience the DTS track. This is a disc that a lot of people chase after because not only is it the Frighteners and Peter Jackson, but also it's getting to be a later pressing and it's hard to find the DTS version. So this will be a lot of fun to spin up because I'm sure the track on here is really stupendous, but you also have the nice thick gloss on the nicely printed DTS jacket, but of course slightly thinner cardstock, which is why there is just a little bit of corner creasing, which is again going to be pretty common to any sort of DTS or late release image printing of a Laserdisc title, simply because they went for this really glossy but very thin jacket printing. This is another Universal title that went through a couple different LD pressings, but you had to get the DTS version of Liar Liar to get the full sonic experience of the DTS track. And even though this is a comedy, it is still a 1990s comedy with a 1990s much more boisterous 5.1 mix, and I've always been curious how the sort of non-action films sounded on their DTS Laserdisc presentations, so this will be fun to crank up, and even though it's not obviously a big action extravaganza, this of course has the nicer glossy jacket. Even though it's thinner, it has that nice glossy appearance and just has that premium sort of feel in the hand, and at some point someone just kept the THX original sticker on the actual jacket, so they actually just placed it on here, which actually does look pretty nice because otherwise there's just a lot of dead space here. There was, of course, a Signature Collection Laserdisc that did have a number of extras, and the DTS versions did not carry those over. Interestingly, they never actually put the DTS tracks themselves on the collector's signature collections in terms of Universal releases, which is kind of odd. So you had to still get the separate DTS version, which would usually just be like this, a single CLV disc, and some of those signature box sets could have CAV sides. So this is like, just like the Disney boxes. They would do the big deluxe CAV sets with Dolby Digital AC3, but make the DTS and the exclusive standalone CLV version, which I'll talk about in a minute, actually. But this is otherwise a nice presentation. Should be the same overall video master, but here you're just getting the benefit of full bitrate DTS on the digital tracks for whatever benefit that may be, because it's not a big action film, but you'll still get the original mix and much higher quality. And speaking of Disney titles that got a really big spiffy collector's edition deluxe box set with a gorgeous box, CAV sides, but usually just Dolby Surround Matrix PCM or Dolby Digital AC3, and then if you wanted DTS, you had to get a later standalone pressing. Well, here we have the DTS for The Nightmare Before Christmas, which got a beautiful Disney-produced deluxe box set with all kinds of extras, but a couple years down the road, we got this later standalone reissue DTS pressing. So this does have a version of original poster artwork with the DTS banner being purple, like what you see on Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame DTS pressing. But they've also actually kept the widescreen Laserdisc banner up on top. So I guess originally this jacket was designed, with that on top and no DTS banner, but they just used this sort of mock-up for the DTS release. Most DTS discs, they didn't actually have both a DTS banner and still the traditional widescreen banner, so that's kind of interesting. You kind of don't even notice that at first. Your eyes kind of gloss over it. But this has the more modernized or later DTS banner on the top, but also has the really nice glossy cover with a nice finish on it that makes the color and the printing really jump out more and gives it a premium feel. But of course is also very thin cardstock, so you have to be careful not to ding this up or drop it or get your corners creased. The rear looks pretty nice, but it also, belies the fact that this is still technically a Disney disc and, seems pretty much like what you'd see slimmed down for the VHS release and what you'd see on the standard pressing on Laserdisc of The Nightmare Before Christmas. That wasn't the big deluxe box set. This is probably, I would think, the same picture master. It's credited at being matted in a 1.66 to 1 ratio, and I'm pretty sure that's the same credit that's on the standard pressing and the box set version. But here the difference is you're getting the full bitrate DTS track on the digital channels, which is of course better than what you get in the box set. And as a backup, you do have analog stereo, which is also Dolby Surround encoded. So basically you're getting an analog version of what would be on the standard release and box set's digital tracks. And since this isn't the box set version, it's just a single CLV disc without any of the extras of the box set. So just like all the other Disney box set titles that got a big deluxe special edition, you have to have the box sets for the gorgeous packaging and the printed extras and the books and all the supplemental features and the CAV sides for the actual feature. But if you want technically the best sound presentation in discrete multi-channel, you have to actually go for the slightly later standalone movie-only DTS pressing. And this is one that does not pop up very often, so I'm very happy to have this. And now I can also watch this for Halloween season and check out how the DTS Laserdisc audio compares to other versions I've looked at over the years. And then I'll close out with the two standalone titles that he sent me that are not DTS or AC3 or Criterion titles. Both of these, though, are extraordinarily uncommon discs, and if I had already been surprised by what was in this mystery box, then I got to these last two, and I just, as usual, I could not believe it that this was that these were the contents of this mystery box. So this first one is a disc that I know a lot of people try to seek out because it also has the film's alternative title, and that is the Japanese pressing of Evil Dead 3: Army of Darkness with the absolutely phenomenal original poster artwork and the original Obi strip. But on the rear, it actually carries the alternative title of Captain Supermarket, which is one of the most, I think, wonderfully amusing odd translated titles that you get in foreign markets, particularly in Japan, of any film ever. So it just tickles the fancy so much that there actually is a physical video release with the Captain Supermarket title, and that's what you have here on the Japanese pressing, which otherwise is very typical of a Japanese jacket by having all kinds of different imagery and being extraordinarily lively in its presentation to be as eye-catching as possible, compared to the very straightforward US pressing. The Japanese jacket is way beyond. So this is one of the very easily frameable jackets you could find, and another reason why this is so highly sought after. The other reason is that this is the alternative Japanese cut of the film, which is slightly different to the US release, so that also makes it very desirable for fans of the film. So here is the front cover without the Obi strip, and I really do like the presentation, and like a lot of Japanese discs, the printing is really nice with the colors kind of having, well, they're not just bold, but they almost have a slightly, they're not quite oversaturated, but they almost have that sort of effect to them. You'll see that on a lot of Japanese jackets where they really took effort to get the color to be as bold looking as possible. Otherwise, this does have the original Dolby Stereo mix as PCM, so you get that. But I do believe this is actually a 1:3:3 transfer. I don't think this is actually widescreen. So that is the one downside to this release, that you can't get it in the widescreen original ratio, which you can get on the US standard Laserdisc of the US cut of the film. But this is just a really nice piece to have if you're a fan of the film. It's one that I know a lot of people chase after, and I've seen a lot of people finally have success in finding one, but I certainly never expected it to be part of a mystery box, and so now I can actually look at the wonderfully amusing Captain Supermarket edition. And then last but certainly not least is a very interesting title that I've read a lot of fellow fans rave about the transfer. It's also a super late release, and a disc I've always been curious to check out because not only is it a late release with a renowned picture transfer, but it's also notable for continually transitioning between color and black and white, and it'll be really interesting to see how that plays with a Laserdisc transfer. So that's, of course, the release of Pleasantville in the widescreen Laserdisc. This is a very late release pressing. Of course, 1998 film. This is a 1999 late release Laserdisc, but like a lot of late releases, it does not have a gatefold. So this is a 2-disc set because this is a longer film, but it's just a single pocket gatefold with the thinner cardstock, so you do have to be careful in handling it and also try to find a copy that's not beat up with dinged corners and things. This is a really nice condition version, so I've always wanted to check this out because I've seen a lot of people rave about how great the transfer is, and again, it'll be really interesting to see how the color and black and white transitions play with a NTSC Laserdisc transfer, because eventually they start happening in the film in the same scene, and you have color and black and white actually interacting in the same shot, which of course was very notable, especially at the time in 1998. Now, this is 2 discs with the film spread over 3 sides, but it does actually include a number of extras, including a director's commentary, music videos, theatrical trailers, which is all listed here on the rear. So this is actually a relative special edition title and not just a traditional late release movie only disc. So this is one I've wanted to check out for a long time. It's of course actually handled by Image Entertainment because this is a super late release, and you do get Dolby Digital 5.1 in addition to the backup Dolby Surround encoded PCM track. So this would pretty much be replicated by the film's original DVD release, I would think. And so if you view that, it's probably overall the same picture master, but being an early DVD, it's probably going to have a lot of noise and compression issues and things that you find common to a lot of early DVDs, which frequently makes the late release Laserdisc, if you have a good setup, actually the more pleasurable viewing option. And a lot of these late releases can be real works of NTSC video art, if you will, just at getting much more complicated films transferred beautifully into standard def composite video transfers, and from obviously a component master. The engineers had to really be on their game to actually make this stuff work on the Laserdisc format, and by 1999 they really knew what they were doing, and DVD was only 2 years old by this point, so they still had a learning curve. So I've just been really curious to check this out, and now I could finally look at this transfer that so many other Laserdisc fans have talked about being really phenomenal. So that's it for this mystery box, and once again, my absolute thanks to Jason Koestner, who sent me these incredible titles just out of the kindness of his heart, and just titles that have been on my wish list for years, and some discs that I just never thought I would see, and others that I had only heard of or seen people chase after. So not only does this give me some titles I've wanted to check out for their audio quality for a long time, or particular pressings I've never been able to look at, but also a few discs to add to my annual I watch way too many classic horror films and try to cram them all into a month October viewing. So that'll at least be fun to mix in some DTS titles. So as always, I hope my babblings about films and physical media and the wonders of the Laserdisc format have been at least somewhat fun and informative. If you've had any experience with these discs in terms of these particular pressings, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hopefully you will find some fun Laserdisc finds in some of your local stores and areas, so please do keep supporting your local record stores or wherever you may find Laserdisc pop up occasionally in your area, because you never know when they'll turn up, and hopefully there are a nice amount of discs that turn up in your area if things have been scarce for a while. And as always, keep your players spinning to help keep the magic and fun of the Laserdisc format alive and foam culture alive. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.